Welcome to Patrick Parson Workshop. We're going to be making some diagonal bookshelves. And this is for the same friend of mine that we made the sign for, so take a look back through the videos if you want to take a look at that. And the bookshelf is going to be 14 inches deep, so I'm going to start with 4 sheets of birch plywood 4x8 sheets, and I'm going to rip that down into 14-inch strips. So these shelves are irregular, they're not just a simple grid, but any place where the boards were going to cross each other in an X pattern, I wanted to join them using slots that would be a 7-inch slot in each of the boards, and then those slots would slide together to connect the boards. That way there's no need for any gluing or any fasteners of any kind. It's very important if you use that kind of joinery though to make sure that the slots that you're cutting are going to be very tight, so you want to test that out on some scrap wood after I have the jig clamped onto the plywood, and taking small passes. I didn't set the depth of the router bit too deep because it would burn the wood and smoke and make a mess. So I took several passes to cut that slot in the plywood. And here's what it looks like when the strips of plywood are joined together using those slots. And sometimes the strips came together, but I didn't have an X, so I couldn't use the slots. So in those cases, I just used 3-inch drywall screws and wood glue. And I really like to plan as I go along rather than having a drawing or using SketchUp to plan it all out before I start. So here I am using a straight edge and some blue painter's tape to mark where I'm going to put the next plywood strips. And this really helps to kind of give you a picture of what it's going to look like and the size of the nooks in your bookshelf. And you can see that there are 4 of the nooks in the bookcase that have a back on them. And that's just a 1/4-inch plywood back. And I did that for 2 reasons. Number 1 is to give it some extra rigidity. And number 2 is because I'm going to do something special to give it a little splash of color. I used Valspar Color Radiance paint and primer, and it's a flat paint. And the color is called Blindfold. And I love the color. But the issue with the spray paint is the overspray, and the fine aerosol mist, dark gray dust got everywhere. There was a lot of sanding to do to get that fine dust that settled on the bookshelf off after all the spray painting was done. It's early in the morning in the shop, not quite light yet outside, and this is my new buddy Leon. So Leon is one of 2 feral cats that we've been feeding for 4 months, something like 5 months. Leon is he wasn't at first, he was very skittish, but he's very friendly with people and with dogs. He's a little bit scared of cats. He likes the other feral cat that's here, but that's about it. He's leery of the rest of them. Kind of wanders our little small neighborhood. Most everybody knows him, and probably at least half the people in the neighborhood know that we feed him and Edith, and that his name is Leon.
Come here. That's a good boy. That's a good boy, Leon.
Leave the door open here and just let Leon run around. On the 4 back panels, I thought I would pour some epoxy in and then experiment with these dye stains to kind of make some swirls in the epoxy, similar to the ones that you see in my tool wells on the workbench video. Instead of mixing the dye powder and the epoxy together before you pour it in like you see me doing here, I actually had better luck with taking just a little bit of the powder and sprinkling it onto the wet epoxy after I had already put it into the nook, and then just stirring it around. It had a little bit more of an organic look and it looked a little bit more swirly and like marble, which is what I was going for. When the epoxy was wet, I made sure to cover up each of the nooks. In this case, I just used a piece of a trash bag that I cut out to the size and then just taped it on there with some duct tape to make sure no dust got in there and settled on the epoxy. I had to do a lot of sanding with steel wool. I used a total of 4 bags, which is 48 pads of steel wool. And that's mostly because of the fine dust from the spray paint. And then to make it more durable, I finished it off with 3 coats of Minwax fast drying polyurethane clear satin, and I sanded with the same steel wool in between each coat, and then sanded it all one more time with the steel wool after it was all finished.
What you told? There you go. Hey, look, you first. Yeah, maybe some this way.
It was just about to get good.
It's the end of the video?
Just about.
What are we going to do?
Well, they could subscribe.
That's a good idea, Jimmy. Folks, if you want to see more of these videos, please subscribe. And also
Yeah,
like
we get a kick out
and
of
comment.
that.
We do.
Thanks, folks.